Constantly shifting through the time-space continuum, Metron's three disciples observe the universe from the Mobius Couch.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 1 of the Mobius Couch, a brand new podcast where I'm being talked over, but we're going to talk about comics. Episode 1 is going to be about Tom King and Mitch Gerads' Mr. Miracle, one of the best comic book runs of the past 10, 20, you pick a time period. It's incredible. I'm Alessandro, and I'm joined on the Mobius Couch by Patrick.
Patrick's voice, this is what I sound like, so when Patrick's talking, it's this voice.
Thank you for confirming that. And we're also joined on the Mobius Couch by Joe.
Oh, hey, Al. Hey.
So as I mentioned, we're talking about Mr. Miracle. Before we begin, both of you read it. What do you think? You like this? You like this comic run? What's your general thoughts on the Mr. Miracle?
I'd have to agree with you. I think it's probably one of the greatest runs on a comic book in the last several decades. Joe, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I liked it a lot.
We're gonna have a contrasting
high
opinion.
Level of a lot. I don't know if I would say it's. I mean, it's really, really, really good. I don't know. I think, sometimes when you read as much comic books as the three of us do, like, it's hard to quantify when something is newer than like shit I read in 1985. Like, it's a little harder for me to quantify like how much I like it. Like, more time has to pass for it to climb those ranks of like greatest thing ever read. It is, of modern comic books, one of the greatest fucking runs I've ever read on a book in recent memory, for sure.
I think the thing about this specific book is it Mitch Gerads? I can't pronounce his last name.
I don't know how to say his name
I have no
properly.
idea.
I mean, I think you did a good job, Al, when you said it out loud a minute ago.
Yeah,
but I
and that's why
forgot how you did it.
I was like, I've been pronouncing it Mitch Gerads in my head for the last
What did I say? It's Gerads.
I don't know.
I just say Gerads, like the jewelry.
That might make more Gerads. That might make more sense.
Anyway, it's
that's going to be something that
Gerads.
happens consistently on this podcast, I assume.
Okay.
Play.
I feel like we should just. Why don't we discuss the comic instead of names? Because I have no idea how to pronounce these names. So let's just talk about the comic.
We'll just call them Mitch. Tom and Mitch.
Tom and Mitch.
There you go, Tom and Mitch.
Great run.
Nailed it.
Great run of Mr. Miracle.
Well, no, the point is, I think his like art adds a lot to the weight of the story. Like, I think if a different artist did it, like, not that Tom King's writing isn't fantastic, but the combination of the two makes the weight of it really heavy and then also very comical at the same time. But
I would like to see specifically the scripts, and I would love to know if Tom King was like, make these three by three, like 9 panels per page endlessly. Like, I want to know if that was like Mitch's idea of like, hey, wouldn't it be interesting if it was like broken up into these little tiny squares the entire series, or if that was like, and it does break that rule periodically, but like, many of the pages are 3 by 3s, which is hard to draw. Let's put it that. So it's like, it's really hard to get information into those small amounts of pages. It does lend itself well to conversational comics, which this very much is. So I mean, like, it's that thing, but I'm kind of going like, I wonder if Tom King was like, draw it like this, and this is how many panels per page, or if he was like, oh, I got this, and was just going for it with the art. Well, there's so many pregnant pauses. Like, the 9 panels per page gives you like that ability to, like, someone says something, and then there's a silent panel, or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, and then someone responds. So that weight of them like pausing and thinking before they like actually say words to the next person, back to the person. And you're just like a lot of the conversations between Scott and Barda sitting on the couch or something like that, like where like he would just say something or she would say something and they would just sit there for a long time, like watching TV or quiet, and then he'd just be like, okay, so we'll do this, like, kind of thing. And like those little moments are like fantastic, and
which was the best part. Was the best part of the book, I think. But it was like
It's a big part of the book, though. It makes it awesome.
But yeah, and that's what makes it so great. He's like, we should talk about the war, and she's like, no, and it's like awkward panel.
And then
like, I think I'm gonna give
panels of silence.
Yeah, but then it's like, I think I'm gonna give my baby to Darkseid.
Yeah,
yeah. Not like I'm gonna go.
What do you think about giving our son to Darkseid? I mean,
well, at this point, maybe we should just quick disclaimer: spoilers.
Oh, spoilers!
Yeah, we're spoiling the run. Yeah, we're talking about the whole run. And whether this episode becomes a two-parter and this conversation runs long, who cares? But like right now, it's like, we're talking about the whole series, obviously.
Well,
I feel like that's kind of true.
Ruined it for people. But
Come on.
So just
I
be
feel like
aware.
It's kind of true for
anything
that we do, though, for the future.
But I do. So getting back to what we were talking about, though, with Scott and Barda. I mean, one of the things that I thought was cool is, I mean, a lot of this was kind of about like normal, everyday life stuff, but in the context of epic new god space opera. Including like the Scott and Barda thing, like from the marriage side of like, what's it like to be married? And also,
just be married, period.
Yeah, but then the other part of like being married and having a child in private life, but also balancing that with your professional obligations, which in this case was an intergalactic war. So it's like hyperbole, sort of, but it is like a real life conflict that people have and struggle.
There's the middle chunk of episode, or I'm going to mix up the word episodes and issues every single issue / episode of this podcast.
When you're 4 beers into reading, that's going to happen.
Just so our listeners know. I'm going to say those words backwards constantly. Anyway, and there are the middle chunk of issues in this run are probably some of my favorite singular issues of comic books in God knows how long. Hawkeye Pizza Dog issue is up there in terms of like, this is one of the greatest things I've ever read. If you guys know what I'm talking about.
No, what? Hawkeye.
There's an issue
dog?
He calls him Pizza Dog because the dog was eating pizza, I think. He doesn't have a name for the dog. But there's like a dog that lives with Hawkeye. And then there's this one specific issue of Hawkeye where the dog, it centers on the dog, and it's just the dog like walking around the apartment building, like trying to figure something out for the story. But like, it'll be him, like Hawkeye and Kate Bishop will talk, and like, they'll just like, it'll be like garbled, like kind of like Peanuts, the cartoon or something, they'll be like, rah, 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 and then it'll be like pizza, and like it would just say like a word, like he'd know like certain words. And anyway, but that is one of the greatest issues of the comic book ever. But there is something in issue like 6, maybe 7, maybe 8, a little bit of 8, but like issue 6 of this is like by far my favorite issue, hands down. Favorite issue this run.
Which issue is 6?
So 6 is when they decide to go fight Orion, and they're fighting through all the traps.
Yes.
But the entire episode or issue is them like fighting through all the traps to get to Orion, but the entire time they're just discussing remodeling their condo, which is like one of the most fantastic things I've ever read. But my favorite part is like somewhere in the middle, they're on like a wire, and like Scott is like stepping along the wire, like as he's walking, and like Barda's like climbing it with her arms, so she's hanging underneath. And they're having this in-depth discussion about like God and his father is God, and like what that means, and like what it means to be the son of a god, and like all this stuff, and like this heavy shit. And then you flip to the next page, and it's just like panel after panel of them quietly tightroping along this thing. And then Scott just goes, so half the living room? Because they're talking about cutting the living room.
They want to
half.
expand the bedroom or something,
and it's the greatest fucking, I was like, that right there sums up this whole run so perfectly. Like, it's like the greatest, like, I love it.
But same...
Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say in that same panel, like I love Barda's like always just like stone cold, doesn't really talk until Scott like, keeps asking.
Changes the subject a lot too.
Yeah, and then so it's just in that same scene, she's talking about how like Scott's talking about how when Granny would say "I love you," he like kind of believed it, and he's like, "Didn't you believe it?" And she's like, "No." She's like, "I grew up in that shit, so it was just noise to me." She's like, "You had like somewhat of a pampered life for a second, so you kind of understood what love was, so you didn't really understand like your
To Barda, those little moments of Granny showing kindness in quotation marks was like nothingness. It was just more screams in hell. And to Scott, he was like, "Oh, you do care about me," and really, and whether or not that's true or not, I almost feel like it is in a weird way. Like, especially the Granny they present.
Oh yeah.
In like issue 2 or whatever, like before she dies, like that Granny that they present in this, aside from starving the guy to death at the table that they're currently eating at, like she doesn't do anything like horrible. She just like she sees them, she's like, "My babies, how are you?" And like, and just like, and I'm like, this is so bizarre. Like I'm so used to Granny just being like, "And also I'm going to kill you now." You know, like there was none of that.
But
it was just like
she still is that person though.
Yeah, but she is.
I know.
I guess I think that's the key. She is that person.
It was
almost because this is like Scott. Well,
Yes.
I guess we can get on that bigger note of that, like whether this is real or not, or what this fucking all means. But like
Scott's representation.
Yeah, like because it's like Scott, like envisioning her, maybe.
Yeah, I didn't
we don't
think
know
about that, but that sounds
is
right.
like this vision of Granny where she's just like she's basically nice, except she's torturing someone right next to them. But like she's nice to them, you know, kind of thing.
It's so crazy because you kind of I love how it kind of established them as like they grew up on Apocalypse, so like seeing like people getting tortured and stuff, it doesn't really faze them. Like at the dinner table, he's like, "Is that Stormforge? You're starving Stormforge to death?"
Yeah,
she's like, "Yes," and he's like, "Huh."
That is, well. I mean, I guess they're not there to do that. Like they're weird. Yeah. They're so weirdly matter of fact about certain things.
Before we move on to another topic, I wanted to just because I recently read The Testaments, which is the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood.
Yeah.
And there was a quote in it that I shared it because it reminded me 100% of what we were just talking about with Scott's memories of Granny Goodness.
Yeah.
So this is The Handmaid's Tale is like a post-apocalypse where America is basically today's America, but it was written in the 80s, so at that point it was an apocalypse. Rim shot, I'm kidding. But it's a conservative, religious conservative dystopia. Anyway, the quote was, "I hope you will remember too that we all have some nostalgia for whatever kindness we have known as children, however bizarre the conditions of that childhood may seem to others." And it's talking about this woman who was raised in Gilead, which is the dystopia, and how women there are raised without rights and in a conservative sort of environment with like no trappings of fun or happiness. But she's
and how they're like used to
memories growing up there, and that reminded me of sort of what we were just talking about, how Scott talked about Granny Goodness with some degree of fondness, even though she burned them in fire pits every day.
There was multiple moments of that though throughout. So like it wasn't just right now while I read this
comic that I appreciated is that so much of it is just not directly told to you. So like that example where Scott says, "Do you remember when Granny did this?" And Barda just says like, "Whatever, let's fight this war."
Yeah.
What does that mean? Does that mean Granny did do that and Barda doesn't care? Does it mean she only did that to Scott? Does it mean she never did that? Scott is invented.
I think it means she only did it to Scott. I mean, or that she only did it for Scott because he was different or special for whatever reason. Maybe because he was the son of Highfather. But also going back to the Barda thing of like all that is noise to her. Like I think even when he's talking about the fond memories he has of Granny, it's just still noise. Like even if he's like, Granny was nice randomly. I mean, she's also horrible, but she was nice here and here and here of the thousands of other times she was horrible to me. To her, it's just like in one ear and out the other because it's hell to her. All of it was hell to her. So I don't think she's dismissing his feelings. I think, or like the reality of that situation. I think she's just not listening to it because she never listened to it.
I also think part of it is going back to how she's dismissive of Scott's feelings. I think it goes into, again, it's unclear what's real and like what isn't and what exactly is happening temporally. But if you think about it from the angle that Scott, her husband and father of her child, just tried to commit suicide 2 weeks ago and now, and tried to like abandon her by committing suicide, and is now saying, "Oh, remember when Granny was nice to us?" I mean, it's also very human to just bitterly say, like, "Just shut the fuck up, man." But this
kind of thing.
Into, I mean, a big theme in the book, not just in terms of Granny, but and Joe, as the only one of us who is a father, maybe you could speak to this more personally. Sure. But this idea of like, once you do have a child, this idea of reflecting upon your own parents and what of them do you want to have and show to your child, and what of them do you not want to emulate? And I mean, part of it is Granny, but certainly we see with Darkseid and Highfather, that's a big part of Scott's psychology in this run.
I mean, that
what of them is worth emulating.
The very last issue, he has a couple conversations with people that are quote unquote dead. Highfather, Oberon, but with the Highfather conversation, he literally just turns around and punches God in the face, which is kind of awesome. But at the same time, it's like, I mean, in theory, he's talking to his dead father. So but he turns around and clocks Highfather in the face and says, "Fuck you." And then he's like, "Scott," and he goes, "Fuck you," kind of, and you're just like, that was kind of awesome. I mean, meaning you're a shitty dad, man. You gave me to fucking Darkseid, kind of thing.
That whole conversation, Highfather was scolding Scott for not giving his son to Darkseid. He was like, "You weren't as strong as me. You didn't give your kid." It's like,
he's just like, go to fucking hell.
But that's also that whole idea of comparing yourself to your parents and how you would be a parent compared to how they were parents. I mean, that comes very directly to the forefront because Scott is asked to give up his child to end a war.
Just so before that happens,
Highfather and Darkseid also did, because Darkseid gave his son Ryan.
Yeah.
So both of Scott's fathers gave up their kid to stop a war.
Yeah,
and
they're
Scott
horrible
is then given that exact deal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very direct. How are you compared to your father?
So there's a couple issues of the run that hit on this note that I want to talk about. So issue 7 is the actual birth of the kid, which is where I can discuss being a father myself. And number 2 is issue 10 is when he discusses war versus his son, and he's trying to weigh those two options, and he literally has that conversation with the guy from Party fucking City about I mean, they don't call it Party City, but it's Party City. And it's he's checking out at Party City. He's like, "Hey, this is a weird thing I'm dealing with. How do you feel about it?" Because he can talk to him about it, but he can't talk to Barda about it because Barda will just shut him down immediately.
Yeah.
And hear him out. And it's just this bizarre conversation. That being said, the end of the episode wraps up with him coming up with that plan where he's like, "All right, we're gonna offer him up, but we're gonna fucking kill Darkseid. That's the plan." But that whole issue is fucking super stressful because he's weighing his son against the lives of thousands and thousands and thousands. I mean, who knows how many people are on New Genesis, and
we gotta be billions.
There's a billion something bugs at least.
Yeah, exactly. So
but the bugs, I mean, they're come on.
Fuck the bugs.
I mean, they're beneath them. They're not gods. And then so fucking horrible. In issue number 4, I wrote Barda slaps Light Ray. Thank God. It's when he's accused of treason, and I was just and she was just Barda just goes and just slaps him. Yes, fuck you. Well, and then she just keeps beating the crap out of him, and at the very end, she's like, "Get the fuck out of my house!" You're this is amazing.
I mean, I love that. She's become one of my favorite characters just from this book.
Oh my God, yes,
I love Barda. Well, first of all, I don't know how
strong, gigantic
super women. Big ripped women are I'm so into that. I mean, so Barda's out of my book.
All right. But the first issue when Orion does that standing thing, keeps slapping Scott.
Yeah.
And then Barda gets
punching
him. Yeah, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And he says something about how he's this tough son of Darkseid, and she gives him this whole she's a solid foot taller than him. The visual of it is fantastic. And then she's like, "No, you were raised in the soft pillows of Avalon or New Genesis."
Yeah.
Scott and I were forged in the fires of the X-Pit. She's like, because he says I'm teaching Scott a lesson, and she's like, both of us know that only Granny can teach, or something like that.
Yes.
She
Only
really
Granny can teach is a fantastic line.
But
I do love how the punch and then stand comments, and then like get punched again, and then stand, and then he says stand, and that comes back multiple times. I mean, specifically at the end, obviously, but like, man, that was, or not the end, but the issue 11, but like with Darkseid fight, but like, it happens other times.
Well, Bart
he goes in and confronts Orion about the anti-life equation, and it happens again. He punches them and he says stand.
Well, I also, to stick with Orion, I thought Orion was a really cool foil to Scott, because if you think about like, Scott is very much not into Darkseid or
he's the antithesis.
Like, he's very
he's the opposite
about both. And Orion sort of embraces both, because he embraces Highfather's position and the trappings of New Genesis lordship, but he also likes to play the tough Apocalypse guy. So he's sort of like, Orion kind of accepts both as like, I'm above these people and I'm awesome. Whereas Scott really has a hard time accepting like, which of those influences is in him, if any.
So circling back to issue number 1, here's something that I really want to talk about, and this overarches the entire run. Is he fucking dead?
Yes. I don't know. Yes. Or he's like
when
in
does
a coma.
The conversation about Barda's eye color come in? Because I missed that when I was trying
the very first issue at the towards the end of it, but then her eyes are drawn, they color them blue for most of the rest of the...
Do they? I thought I paid attention.
Yeah, no, I've tried to, when I first read it, at the end, I tried to go back and kind of like pinpoint where are they blue and where are they brown and what does it mean? And I
did not pay attention.
Make any sense of it. Like it wasn't a.
So that circles back to also Patty's original comment of the art style. Fantastic. Also, are we all on the same page that the weird blurry lines that go across segments of the pages are like Scott's selective memory or wanting to not see something when it's like specifically Granny's head getting cut off in issue 3?
Yeah.
Like it's like it's there, but then it's and it's like crisscrossing, and it's like, what is that? Is that Scott wanted to be like, no, I don't want to see it.
That was a printing error at DC. It was.
Fuck. That's all that was.
It's creepy too, because it's doing it during that Godfrey episode where he's being interviewed, and there's a panel where it's a close-up of Godfrey, and he said, "Did you actually really escape? I mean, death, right? Do you escape death, Mr. Miracle?" And the next panel is a pan out of just Mr. Miracle staring at Godfrey, and the next panel is the same panel, but his head's distorted, and it just says Mr. Miracle responding, "What?"
Yeah. So there's like,
he's like, "Did you escape death?" And he's like,
God, I feel like we could do 10 episodes on just deep diving into every panel that the blurring happens. But on that note,
but to go back,
what did you take away from it overall?
Yeah, well, so let's cut it right. Let's start at the beginning. So this is basically Scott has escaped everything in the world. He's the greatest escape artist. And the first episode is he decides to escape life, right? That's what suicide is you're trying to escape life.
Yeah.
But
then
the
episode instead of issue, I just wanted to point that out because
wait, what?
You made fun of me for it. Alessandro just said episode instead of issue. I just wanted to point that out because.
Well, but I thought we agreed that that's going to happen.
Oh, it's going to happen for me. I put a disclaimer on myself, not for others.
I thought it was a blanket statement. I'm also
blanket statement. Sorry.
I'm also going to confuse episode and issue.
As I think we all will.
Episode 1, he tries to escape life, but then the rest of the series is about him escaping death, right? Sort of.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of, what angle do we want to take? Because like, there is some Christ imagery.
Well, he is Jesus Christ. He's literally the Son of God that was sacrificed.
Well, that's what I mean. We are talking about the Son of God who killed himself. I mean, there is a lot of.
I mean, we could discuss that not at all, and I'd be fine. Okay. However,
all right. We don't have to.
We can, but I mean, I think him him committing suicide and quote unquote escaping death, like the entire run after that involves him embracing life. So like whether or not he's escaping death, who cares, I guess, but it focuses on him and his marriage and his children. and like what, and the balance of all of that with the insane work life that he has, which is fucking a war, kind of thing. Like, so like that, I mean, I don't know if it's escaping death. I think it's more like embracing life. But I mean, I guess you could call that the same thing. It's kind of.
I'm just trying to phrase it as the escape because he's an escape artist, I guess. But
well, my take on it was that I think he's either in a coma or in like that blip of space, like between life and death, where you kind of relive your whole life or whatever you want to call it. It was like a Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah, we all know that. We've been there.
Basically, he gets to the point where he's figured out that he's overcome all of his fears. He fought Darkseid, embraced being High Father, whatever. And so Metron is like, you're not supposed to be dead. You're not supposed
quick time out. Metron, who sits on the Mobius chair.
Mobius chair.
Inspiration.
Not the Mobius couch. It's a chair. He's only one man. He doesn't need a couch.
But he inspired.
He doesn't need a whole couch.
There's three of us.
I mean,
3 people. Anyway, go on, Patrick. I just had to, for the audience, I had to plug.
This is a weirdly fitting first episode of the show.
Yeah.
It wasn't, and honestly, not really planned. Just something a comic run that we liked. We talked about a lot of names for the podcast. This is just happenstance.
For the record, 3-page spread would have been a better time. That would have been the best title. I guess the audience doesn't care about that now, but that would have been the best title.
I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that your idea wasn't as good as Patty's idea, Al. It doesn't matter.
I think Mobius Couch was also my idea, but
I don't think so.
I don't remember.
It probably was.
Fairly certain.
Honestly, I didn't know whose idea it was. I just made it Patty's idea to make you less than. So anyway, is he fucking dead? I don't know. Also,
I think he's still like in a coma or whatever. And I'm like, I think he's eventually probably going to come out, and that's how we're going to bring him back into the main DC continuity. But when his old friend Oberon shows up, he's like, because he's constructed this. He basically went to hell, was able to make a little paradise inside of hell. So he kind of escaped hell inside this little family unit. And then he's given the option to leave all that and go back, to his actual wife into the real continuity.
So theoretically, DC doesn't fuck this up, and at some point, which they will, but which at some point you think that like if Mr. Miracle was reintroduced into like the current DC universe, he would like wake up and have scars on his arms or something like that.
Well, because I just read Deceased Planet, like number 4, and he's in that. And there's a whole scene with him with Jacob. He abandons his son Jacob with Highfather. And then there's the whole scene where he shows up and Orion does the punch in the face, standing thing. And I feel like that came out of Mr. Miracle. So I think he's eventually going to go back to the real world.
I mean, again, I read a lot of DC comics. However, I'm kind of off on it. Isn't Darkseid currently dead? And if so, is this the result of that? Or is that the result of this, rather?
Well, but I feel like the end of it gets a little bit kind of like postmodern meta because like you mentioned, Patrick, when Metron comes back and he says like, Scott, look into the light, like this is the other path, and you see all the DC heroes. I feel like that's a like sort of a meta way of saying like, do you want to be part of continuity? Like come back into greater DC.
I definitely took that way. Also, that was clearly like specifically the Rebirth characters. Like Wally West was there in that like silver blue.
Whenever this, when did this come out? Like 2016 or so?
2017 to 2019. So there's like a long, like a decent time span for 12 issues, which is a little bizarre. But I mean, I'll take it because Mitch Gerads art is fantastic. So if it took 2 years, great.
Also saying come back to continuity, kind of.
And it's kind of
like I think so, but also he chose to not do that. So like the following issue, so that's in issue 11, and it's almost like he chose to not do that. So so I don't know.
Well, because he has the conversation then with Oberon's ghost, and he's like, did I make the right decision staying here and not going back to the real world? And they're really kind of making fun of how many times DC's rebooted their universe, because Oberon's like, why is that world any more real than this one? That thing keeps resetting every few years. Like
on that note, Patty, when they mentioned his son Jacob in like a different alternate reality timeline thing, deceased or whatever, like that just means they probably didn't even understand what they were reading. Like, I mean, in all seriousness, I bet they were like, I guess he has a son now. Let's try to put this in here. And then they're like, that's not in reality, man. That's in a different thing.
Yeah.
Did you read the series?
And
they're
some
like,
intern going, hey, boss,
No,
people love the Tom King Mr. Miracle. We got to bring it in.
Yeah, bring it in.
Nielsen ratings are through the roof, boss. We got to use it.
So terrible. God.
Oh, fucking goddamn it. Worst. Anyway, yeah, he shows them the Rebirth characters. So, like, it's kind of one of those. Also, Metron pops up in the middle, says, don't look at the face of God. And he's got, like, crazy old man eyebrows.
Yeah.
And then when Metron's at the end, in issue 11, he looks younger, but it's also not, it's far enough away from his face where, like, that might not be in detail. And I'm like,
no, he's definitely younger.
That's the same Metron, or is it a younger Metron?
I don't think it's
and what that means exactly?
Because that Metron is telling him to look into the face of God. The other one, the older one, is
Metron tells him two different things. Because the first time he says don't look, and then at the end he says, do look.
Yeah, he says time to look into the face of God and hear your cheers and take your bow. Where you are is not where you should be.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, assuming that's a younger Metron in issue 11 and issue 6 or 7 or wherever the fuck he talks to Metron earlier, and it's old Metron, it'd be interesting that the younger one is like, absolutely do this. And then a gajillion years later, for however long it takes Metron to get old man eyebrows, goes back in time and talks to Scott and goes, don't do that. That's an interesting dynamic, because that's a whole nother thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Anyway, on issue 11, I want to talk about this for a fucking second. Darkseid eats a carrot. It's hilarious.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, there's a
whole veggie tray thing is
veggie tray.
And then the baby touching his nose, and it's just like, yeah, and just like, God damn,
that part was killing me.
Priceless.
Like,
priceless.
Cutting the Darkseid, and it's like Mr. Miracle is giving this kid away, and it's kind of like you're dropping the dog off. Like the dog likes this for breakfast. He's like, that's my son's word for nose.
Yeah. He's like, I'm assuming you're going to be taking care of him, right? Am I wrong?
Yeah.
Wrong? Oh, I'm wrong. No, I'm right? Okay, that's his word for nose. That was fucking
and
hilarious.
Bart was like, no, it's not. That whole
then Bart is just arguing with him. It was fantastic. The whole issue 11 is fantastic. It's my second favorite issue in the entire series.
Well, my favorite.
They set up the veggie tray thing like 3 times. And then the veggie tray ends up having the knife in it. I mean, that was an obvious thing.
My favorite issue was when they're the one where they discuss the treaty before it's the one that ends.
Okay, so negotiations. That's episode 9. That's issue 9. So let's talk about that.
I think it's 8. Well, 8 is the one I'm talking. I think 8 is the one where
you're wrong.
Renaissance Man tells him the Da Vinci story.
You're wrong. That's issue 9.
That's 9.
And all written down in my notes like a fucking.
I just typed pages.
Like a goddamn library.
All right. Well, then issue 9 is my favorite. But I love Darkseid's Renaissance General. Like, love that guy.
Yeah, he's fantastic. The P conversation is fantastic. Also, when he says I can take him, I thought he meant I can take him in a fight, because he had already beaten the crap out of him in like the earlier issues, and I was like, because he's like, can I go to the bathroom? I'm fucking done. And he's like, I could take him. And I was like, I can take him. Is he talking about fighting him again? And then he's like, oh, he literally means take him to the bathroom. It's fantastic. And then we go down. So good. That conversation. First of all.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go.
I was just going to say, I love how he has all this elaborate shit with like Da Vinci and this like fairy tale. And then at the end, he's like, yeah, it was all bullshit, but just you're the son of God. I thought, I wanted to impress you.
It was fucking amazing. He walks him down. He's like, well, the conversation leading to the giant pit where they pee off of is fantastic. You get really lost in here. I'm sorry. I mean, like, I know it seems weird, but it's a lot of turns and twists. And then they get there and they're peeing. At some point, he spits off of it, and it shows the spit follow down, and then it hits on someone's head, and you're like, that's fantastic.
Well, because it takes the spit the entire time of him telling the Da Vinci story to get all the way to the ground. I think my favorite bit.
Just 9 panels of spit slowly twirling around through the air.
There's the dramatic scene where, Caliban, is it Caliban? He pulls up the new god that's holding the table up and throws him against the wall to scare Mr. Miracle.
Yeah,
Mr. Miracle responds, talking about He says, Brother Calbeck, when will you finally learn I'm not some new Genesis toddler? I'm not Orion eager to play your games. I'm Granny raised, and I don't waste time on the dead. Like saying, like, he did not
the
give a
second
shit.
that guy was dead, he didn't give a fuck.
Yeah, but so that's so great. But then literally you cut to the next scene, and it's Scott in a fetal position in bed in the condo in LA, and he's going, Jesus Christ. And Bart is like chill as fuck. She's like, don't worry, we'll kill him later. That guy was gonna die anyways.
Yeah,
Scott's like
fine.
Scott's having a full-on meltdown. He's like, my teeth are chattering.
He's like, my teeth chatter if I don't if I stop breathing, they don't chatter. She goes, well, don't stop breathing. I was like, that's fantastic. Also, the negotiation issue, my favorite fucking part is just Calabac sitting at the goddamn table and then just like undoing his glasses for 8 panels. so he can put on his futuristic apocalypse space glasses and be like, it says here in article 15 of paragraph 3, you know, just like, that was fantastic. I was like,
well, he's bigger. He's like 3 times the size of the entire table, all hunched over. Like Hulk monster. And he's just like, let me put my readers on.
Usually artists like Mitch Gerads have a tendency to like draw like real life people like really, really well. Like they're really good at like drawing people at park benches and like drawing like and then taking their clothes off and drawing outlines on their bodies, and that's a superhero. Like that's kind of how they draw. And then they tend to kind of fuck up the bigger character. Like those types, like that type of art style doesn't necessarily lend itself to like Calabac or Darkseid or, you know, those kind of like over their sized characters. He crushes it. Calabac looks amazing sitting at the table with realistically sized Barda and realistically sized Mr. Miracle and like shit like that. And same with Darkseid in issue 11. Like there's a couple of pages where Darkseid's just sitting there with like his arms out to like the left and right, and he takes up the first 3 panels, you know, like and like the center panel is his head and the other panels are his arms basically. And it's like, they do that a couple of pages in a row, and it's like, it's fantastic. I mean, and it's just like this weird stocky body in the middle, but you're like, that makes sense. I can see that standing next to Mr. Miracle, all this tracks. But that's not easy to do, you know, like the people that draw like way crazy fantastical comic book characters normally, it's easier to pull that off because everyone kind of looks ridiculous. But when you make people look realistic, like the way Mitch does this throughout this series, like you throw in those weird looking guys, it's hard to make them make sense. And he does it really well. And it's fantastic.
What? I kind of love the birthing episode. No, we're all doing it. Issue when Bart is getting birthed, and
all of us do it.
And you just hear the boom tube go off in the lobby, and Scott's like, "What the fuck? I didn't think they were coming."
I thought you said they weren't coming.
And it's the Furies, and you're like, "What the fuck is happening?"
I like that he knows that it's them immediately. Like he's like, "Who else would come? Your fucking sisters? God damn it!"
Bernadette's like, "Obviously, we would have missed the birth, but I'll use the same dagger to stab your eye out."
I love how the Furies exclusively talk about how they're going to murder Scott. Like every chance they get, they're just like, "I'm going to kill you slowly." Oh, the baby.
I mean, if we're in the consensus that this is kind of all within Scott's mind, whether it's a micro universe or whatever, and it is going to be written into canon later, who gives a shit? But like, that's his layer. If that's his takeaway from who they are in real life, like, it's fantastic. Like, I love it.
It's sure. Like,
also, I was circling back around to what Al said about fatherhood and a million minutes ago. Birth episode.
It wasn't. We've only been
a little too close to reality for me. Like I was like, oh, this is fucked up. Like there was so many little things. Like, wait, why is the thing not beeping? Like it should be beeping. Like why is it not beeping? And they're like freaking out. There's little freak out moments of like everything's fine. The nurses come in and they're like, chill the fuck out, you idiots. Like everything's gonna be okay. Like just move around. Beep beep. Oh, see, everything's fine. But that's so fucking real. It's not even fun. Like you have these little moments of like meltdowns where you're like, is something wrong? Is something wrong? What's going on? Like I'm like, clearly Tom King's had a child or two because he's been like, let me write this down. This is good for, I don't know when the fuck I'll use this, but this is gonna be, let me just write this experience down because it was like fucking flawless about like having a child and being freaked out.
Yeah, especially like you know how the Jacob has that little Batman toy, and like he starts this whole narrative about like, oh, Batman kills kids, watch it, like all this.
Yeah.
The toy gets like a personality. And I remember like when I was a kid, it was like that. Like your toys would have like whole narratives around like their lives and what they would do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Part of it is like your parents feed into that. So I just thought that was kind of
just
cool.
The Batman toy in toys in the cribs kill people or kill kids, and that we haven't even discussed Funky. But Funky's like, what are you talking about? She wanted the toy, or he wanted the toy. I gave him the toy. He's like, you can't have a toy in the crib when they're sleeping. They're gonna choke to death.
Well, and then
it just becomes this thing that just keeps popping up.
I just thought it was funny that it was Batman, because it's like Batman kills kids, because he does. Like he puts kids, like Tom's like, or Scott's like super protective of his kid, and Batman's like, Dick, throw this costume on, go outside.
Yeah, go fight
crime. You're 8 years old. Let's go fight crime. So Batman kills kids. Literally, Jason died.
Yeah, it was like I thought it was like a very subtle dig at Batman and his parenting skills.
Jesus fucking Christ! Oh man. I mean, it's Funky, young Stan Lee, right?
I guess.
Yeah, Kirby did the New Gods, and he and Stan Lee like fucking hated each other. So I'm interested. Like he made a Stan Lee character.
I'm interested to know more about that.
Their ascot tied on his neck all the time, and it I don't know if you got. I think it was in. God damn it! I don't know what movie it was in. Avengers Infinity War, or maybe Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I don't remember. There was a Stan Lee driving by like from the 70s, and he like drove by and it was like young Stan Lee, and I was like, that looks exactly like the character he's drawing, and I was like, I wonder if it's clearly young Stan Lee. He still Excelsior, for fuck's sake. Like it's clearly
and then the story he tells, that didn't really make any sense, but like Jacob's story was basically sounding like Galactus and the Silver Surfer meeting the Fantastic Four, like. Because the dog comes to Earth with the Sun Eater, and he becomes friends with Jacob, and then the dog fights. It was like very much the Fantastic Four's first story with Galactus.
Interesting. I didn't put that together, but that is clearly obvious now that you lay it out for me in such.
And I think that's what they. I don't know. I'm interested to know more about the falling out between them, because I think it was pretty nasty. It sounds like.
Yeah. So I just did a quick reading online. A lot of people apparently have written about how Funky seems Stan Lee-esque.
Yeah.
Like,
I think it's meant to be young Stan Lee. Yeah. If not, like, I mean, obviously he's a new god or whatever, and I do love how he becomes like more and more of a character, because at first you're like, who the fuck is this guy? And he's like, this will be your
oh no, so Funky,
we'll spin it this way, like you're gonna go to New Genesis and die in a trial. It'll be fantastic. And then later on, he's like the wet nurse, and he's like running around like, the baby loves me, and it's like it's kind of awesome.
Well, it's almost like
Joe, I just Wikipedia'd it. So Funky was in the original New Gods, and Jack Kirby made him a caricature of Stan Lee. Like he was supposed to be that in the 70s.
That clears up a lot. Thank you for Wikipediaing.
Thank you.
It's a good thing we have the internet.
Yeah.
Do you think they made like a subtle metaphor about Funky being like taking care of Scott's kids, like in the same way that Jack Kirby basically? I mean, I didn't think he gave his. Basically, like all the characters Jack Kirby created were pretty much taken by Stan Lee, right?
He gave his babies to Stan Lee. Yeah, that makes sense.
So, do you think they meant to do that, or am I reading into something that's not there?
You might be reading into it a little bit, but I like it, so I'm not gonna not give you credit because I like it.
We'll just get Tom and Mitch on the podcast, and we'll ask them.
Yeah. We'll just ask them on. It won't be hard.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm glad we figured it out though. But Funky was in the original New Gods. There we go.
That's crazy. I didn't know that. I had no idea. I mean, I didn't read that kind of stuff back then.
I don't know anything about the New Gods outside of like Barda and Orion being on the JLA back in the 2000s.
I remember Barda being on there. I mean, I guess Barda was more prominent. Okay, we haven't talked about issue 8 almost at all, but I want to talk about it a little bit. I have a random notes that are just like little one-shot comments that we can burn through and then just discuss as I go. If you want to wrap it up with that.
Sure.
Yeah. When's issue 8?
Issue 8 is I wrote, I want all of his shirts, but that's been consistent throughout. Because he wears multiple superhero shirts throughout the entire thing. But they keep getting a little more obscure as it goes. And I'm like, I want all of his shirts. But issue 8 is the baby stuff happens while they're at work, which is them fighting the wars. So it's kind of fucked up because they're like killing people while on the phone with Barda. And like Barda's like, the baby laughed for the first time. And you're like, this is fucked up. Because he's like, for New Genesis. And he cuts somebody's head off. And he's like, so what did Jacob say? You know, and it's really, and then it cuts back and forth to like Barda's gone and he's at home with the kid, and then he's telling her about stuff with the kid, and she's like, hold on, I have to kill someone. And then it's just like the whole issue is just back and forth of like him being fighting and killing people or being with the baby, and it's just this weirdly fucked up but also real version of like what happens when you have a child, because you're like, I'm at work and like Lauren will call me and be like, hey, Violet did this for the first time. And I'm like, oh my God, really? And I'm like, I miss it. But I'm like, I'm just at a computer dicking around. I'm not like cutting somebody's head off. So it's like this fucking very interesting juxtaposition of like what's going on. I loved it.
But that's the whole point, I think, is like a lot of these war scenes, you could like just replace them with Scott at an office. And that's very quote unquote real life.
And yet it makes it so much like interesting. Yes, but it's like, but at the same time, less interesting to read because you're just sitting at a computer making a website. Whereas I'm literally talking to my wife about my child while I'm stabbing someone through the chest with a sword.
Yeah, this issue is fucked up.
It is really fucked up.
Literally, he's making Light Ray dig a mass grave, and he's literally burying dead soldiers while Bart is talking about Jacob laughing for the first time. It's like, what does that mean? And then there's later on in the issue, a baby parademon comes up, and Scott's like, I didn't know they had babies. And
do they have babies? Also, by the way, that's
Light Ray just kills
in and of itself. Let's talk about that for 20 minutes.
What?
Holy fuck! And then Light Ray's just like, and just blasts it. And he's like, do they have babies? Are they different sizes?
Well, no, that's what Scott said. Did they have babies? And then Light Ray goes, "You're from here. Do they come in different sizes?" And he says,
"Yeah." Do they come in different sizes? Is the best comment.
I picked it.
Also, I love your like pseudo English accent for Light Ray. Well, do they come in different sizes?
I don't know. Do they come in different sizes?
Oh, sorry. One of my notes to discuss in rapid fire was Light Ray is a douche. That circles back to issue number 2.
Yeah, this run is not a good look for Light Ray.
Not a good look.
It's not.
I do like the eye patch he wears later on after he gets the shit kicked out of him by Barda, though. That made me happy. Like permanent damage. Like, thank you. Good. You deserved it. So him seeing Orion bleeding to death in issue 6, is that like a fucked up representation of Barda running in to see him bleeding to death?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't see that at all. I was more confused about him seeing the face of God in Orion's dead face or whatever.
He literally runs into the room screaming, Orion, Orion, like freaking out that Orion's on the floor bleeding. And like, if you circle back to issue 1, obviously, that's the exact same thing Barda does to him, almost verbatim.
Well, I was wondering who Scott was talking to. He says he looks directly like at you as the viewer and said, "What did you do?" Like he's not talking to anyone. It's almost like he's talking to Orion. But it confused me because Orion didn't kill himself.
Well,
but I guess maybe he is talking about. I don't know.
Actually, because of the similarities, I was confused for a moment. I thought Orion did kill himself because the issues before that was dealing with him being having the anti-life equation within him. Yeah. And I was like, if Scott has the anti-life equation within him, which is the whole basis of the trial, and then Scott decides to like say, fuck you, I'm not coming to get executed, and I'm going to fight my way to you.
Yeah.
And then like, I thought that was what was going, like, I thought Orion killed himself because the anti-life equation he basically accused Orion of having the anti-life equation within him. And then like a very similar scene plays out. And I was like, and then obviously the Darkseid like face frames does fuck up that like imagery, but like I was like, I didn't even know that Orion hadn't tried to kill himself or did kill himself until issues later when they're like, you had Orion killed. I was like, oh, he did? Oh, I thought he killed himself.
Yeah.
Like I thought he killed
No,
himself.
so I read that differently. I read that like when he was screaming, what did you do or whatever, he's shouting that kind of into the void at Darkseid. But the way visually it's framed, you don't see Darkseid, so that it does call back to Barda and Scott. Like I think it was meant to call back to the suicide.
I think it was definitely meant to call back to it, but I think you're both right in that Orion didn't commit suicide. I think it was purposely.
Yeah, I mean, I think Scott was shouting that at Darkseid, but because he's not in the frame, it's then harking back to a suicide-like sort of construction.
I missed that completely.
I could be wrong. I mean, honestly, I could be wrong. That's just how I read it, but I don't know.
No, it makes sense looking at it now. Like, because I do remember reading it earlier today and being like, who is he talking to?
Yeah,
Also,
I think it's, go ahead.
Funky Flashman says Excelsior. So
yeah.
It does it all the time.
Yeah, hours ago, Al. All right.
I was just going to say that it's from the negotiations issue, but they give him Granny Goodness's mirror or whatever that lets them see what they actually.
Oh yeah, I love that.
But then
it's so fucked up.
It's so fucked up. And then he's using it at the end though, and he's like, "I like to."
And he just has it in the bathroom, and then he's talking to Granny.
Yeah,
like, you just put it in the bathroom, and he's like,
that whole conversation too was bizarre. Like he's like, "I'll move it." Gosh, Mom, okay. Like it, like it is like he has it really fucked up. If it is like Granny from his POV, it's a very disturbing.
It's his mom for sure. Yeah, like 100%. Like.
And she's like,
it's his mom literally going to his house and being like, I gave you this heirloom piano.
Exactly.
And you put it on an outside wall where the weather could damage it? Like, what's wrong with you? You're just like, wow, I don't know anything about pianos. Just seemed like a good place for a piano. Like kind of thing. You're just like, what the fuck? And it's that exact scenario. It's fucking insane. I know this is circling back to almost the goddamn beginning, but I love the fucking shower scene in issue 2. He doesn't know how to turn on the shower.
Yeah.
And it's just him going like, is the shower on? Can you ask your mother box? And she's like in another room. And this is a classic husband and wife scenario. It's just like with bizarre technology thrown in. It's just like, can you do this? Just do it yourself. I don't have my phone with me. My phone's in the other room. Can you just ask your phone if the shower's on? And just like this whole fucking thing. And then finally she goes, the phone says the shower's on. And he goes, am I clean? And it's just like that fucking scene is just covered in blood. What? It is? Am I clean? I just like fucking greatest scene ever. And then also when he finally came out clean, she goes, hey, how do you turn the shower on? I was like, well, I didn't turn it off. Does that help? I don't know the answer. It's so fucking good. There's so many good fucking like random little bits like that through this whole goddamn run. It's amazing.
One other point I wanted to make, just because I'm a classics aficionado. I like a lot of Greek Roman stuff. And a big part of Greek mythology is the hero that goes to the underworld and back, right? Like the chthonic heroes, like Hercules, well, basically all of them, like Theseus, Hercules, all the big heroes journey to the underworld and come back. So I just appreciated that in this comic that Mr. Miracle does a similar journey into death and back, in question mark. But just a very kind of classical heroic journey into death and maybe back. So I just wanted to make that quick comment.
If not back in this, maybe obviously they're not going to kill him. So yes,
journey.
Yeah, but I like
going back into the earth and into death and that sort of journey.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Need to be noted. I did have a note about how he can see into his son's future and his son can see into his past, but it's not necessary. All right, well, that was a good first Mobius Couch. That was a good wet run on the Mobius Couch.
Yeah, couch.
But Joe, do you want to talk about that as a father? Do you have anything to add about that idea of you look into your child's future and they see you in the past, that kind of thing?
I mean, That'd be pretty cool to see. I don't know. I don't have any other comments other than that. I mean, like, I think cool. it would benefit the younger child more than the father, or I feel. But then at the same time, it might change how I parent that child.
Okay, Joe.
If I saw that far into the future,
Joe, I'm going to stop you right there. I wasn't asking you if you could literally see your child's future. How would that affect you as a dad? I meant more the metaphor, the figurative aspect of.
Oh, sorry, I'm in comic book brain mode, and I was breaking down the actual physics of seeing into the future.
Yeah, I meant more like a parent looking at the child and seeing the future, and the child looking at the parent and seeing the past. I meant more about that general dynamic, and less about how you specifically would react if you could see the literal future.
I mean, it's a beautiful concept, if that's what you're asking for. I think it would benefit the child more to see the past as history and like know what came before than per se affect how I would do things as an adult. On that note, with that decision to in issue 11 to like stay with, like, he sees rebirth happening from Metron and goes and kind of stays within his own pocket universe. I'm like, bravo, good job. I mean, like, your wife's happy, you're happy.
Good job.
So that's Mobius Couch for this week, I think.
Mobius Couch.
Yeah.
Oh, are we doing the jingle? Mobius Couch, where you go to hear about comic books and thoughts and things with Patty, Al, and Joe.